Kevin Costner. To millions, he is the hero of sweeping landscapes and daring adventures, the man who embodied courage, romance, and every American ideal on screen. Dances with Wolves in 1990, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991, The Bodyguard in 1992. These were not just films, but milestones that cemented his place in Hollywood history. Yet behind the golden accolades and the applause, there has always been another story, quieter but heavier, a life shaped by private battles, by the invisible weight of expectation, and by heartbreak that fame could never mask. The world saw the triumphs, but few saw the sleepless nights, the inner struggles, the moments when the man behind the legend felt the fragility of being human. This is a story not of stardom, but of survival, the emotional cost of being revered, of carrying the weight of others' admiration while navigating the turbulence of one's own heart. Kevin Costner's story is one of brilliance shadowed by sorrow, and a truth finally emerges that no award could ever capture. Kevin Costner entered the world in 1955 in Linwood, California, the youngest son of a family shaped by discipline, duty, and the steady expectation of strength. His father had served as a United States Navy pilot, a man whose presence carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen the world from the sky and understood the cost of responsibility. For Kevin, childhood was never careless. It was a place where hard work was woven into every day, where the unspoken rule was to stand tall, stay focused, and never let anyone down. Those early years planted the seeds of a lifetime spent trying to meet expectations, some spoken aloud, others carried silently like a weight he could never fully set down. He was bright, athletic, and eager to excel, the kind of child who pushed himself even when no one was watching. Yet beneath that drive lived a sensitive spirit, one easily bruised by failure, one who felt every disappointment more deeply than he ever let on. While other children were free to stumble and try again, Kevin learned early that his mistakes felt heavier, as if the world around him offered very little room for error. He internalized responsibility at an age when most children are still learning who they are, and that burden shaped nearly everything that came after. When he left home to attend California State University in Fullerton, he seemed to be following a path of security and stability. He majored in business, a practical choice, a responsible choice, one that aligned with the kind of future most families dream for their children. But inside him lived a restless pulse, a creative pull that refused to quiet down. Music called to him, acting whispered possibilities he could not yet name. And no matter how hard he tried to fit neatly into the outlines of a traditional life, that inner voice kept asking for more room, more daring, more honesty. Choosing acting was an act of quiet rebellion. It was also an act of faith. Hollywood, however, was not waiting for him with open arms. His first years there were defined by rejection, small roles, and stretches of uncertainty long enough to make anyone question the path they had chosen. Kevin felt the sting of casting directors who forgot his name minutes after meeting him, the weight of working odd jobs to survive, the loneliness of trying to believe in a dream that seemed impossibly far away. Many nights he wondered if he had made a mistake, if walking away from stability had been an act of foolishness rather than bravery. And yet something in him persisted. Perhaps it was the discipline he learned from his father. Perhaps it was the stubborn determination forged in a childhood where quitting was never an option. Or perhaps it was the simple truth that storytelling lived in his bones, refusing to be silenced. Whatever the reason, he kept showing up. He kept pushing forward. And every setback, every closed door, every moment of doubt carved him deeper, shaping a resilience that would one day become the foundation of his career. Kevin Costner's early life was not defined by fame or fortune. It was defined by a quiet boy, learning how to stand under the weight of expectation, by a young man daring to dream beyond the boundaries set before him, and by an emerging artist discovering that perseverance, not talent alone, was the key to becoming the man the world would one day admire. Kevin Costner's rise from obscurity to global recognition did not unfold overnight. It arrived with a force that changed the trajectory of his life, beginning with his breakthrough role in The Untouchables in 1987. In that film, he stood alongside giants of the industry. Yet he brought something uniquely his own: a quiet strength, a steady gaze, and a kind of integrity that made audiences lean in. It was the performance that finally made Hollywood look at him, not as a hopeful newcomer, but as a leading man whose presence carried gravity. That moment opened the door, and once it opened, everything moved quickly. Then came Dances with Wolves in 1990, the film that would redefine not only his career, but his place in cinematic history. He directed and starred in the sweeping epic, stepping into a world of enormous risk. No one knew if audiences would embrace a story of such depth, or if a first-time director could pull off a film of that scale. Yet Kevin poured himself into it, his vision, his conviction, his entire creative soul. The result was a masterpiece that earned him Academy Awards, including the award for Best Director, a rare and remarkable achievement for someone still so early in his filmmaking journey. Success, however, seldom arrives without a cost. With acclaim came an intensity he could never have fully prepared for. The stardom that looked golden from the outside carried a weight that settled into every corner of his life. Suddenly he was everywhere. Magazine covers, interviews, red carpets, film sets that demanded 12, sometimes 16-hour days. The world saw the triumph, the awards, the applause, but it did not see the exhaustion that followed him home, or the silence that filled the spaces between public appearances. Fame has a way of reshaping relationships, sometimes gently, sometimes with a devastating force. Kevin's dedication to his work meant long stretches away from home, promises delayed, moments missed. The people who loved him felt the distance, not out of neglect, but because his career demanded so much. The higher he climbed, the more he felt the subtle erosion of simplicity, the ease of ordinary life slipping further from reach. Even in a crowded room, he often felt alone, surrounded by admirers yet disconnected from the grounding comfort of anonymity he once took for granted. The scrutiny that came with fame compounded that loneliness. Every decision, every gesture, every shift in mood became a subject of public discussion. Being watched so closely left very little room to breathe. Kevin carried the pressure quietly, the way he carried everything, with a calm exterior that rarely revealed the internal strain. But he felt it. He felt the weight of having to be strong, composed, successful, even when he was tired, uncertain, or longing for the simple warmth of privacy. His career soared through those years, reshaping American cinema through bold storytelling and emotional honesty. Films like Dances with Wolves influenced an entire generation of filmmakers, showing that expansive, character-driven epics still had the power to captivate audiences. But behind the brilliance lived a man learning how to remain whole in a world that often demanded pieces of him he could not afford to lose. In the glow of fame, Kevin Costner achieved what many dream of, yet with each step into greatness, he discovered the delicate truth that success, no matter how dazzling, can cast its own kind of shadow, one that follows even the brightest lights, reminding them that every triumph carries an emotional cost. By the early 1990s, Kevin Costner was at the very peak of his career, yet privately he was facing one of the most difficult seasons of his life. Success had come with applause, fame, and history-making achievements, but it had also brought an emotional weight that no award could soften. In those years he began confronting a quiet, persistent exhaustion, the kind that settled deep beneath the surface. Depression entered his life gently at first, almost unnoticed, then with a force that made even small tasks feel heavy. It was not the dramatic breakdown the world associates with celebrities. It was quieter, slower, a steady diminishing of light that only those closest to him could sense. The pressure of maintaining momentum, the demands of public life, and the constant scrutiny wore him down. Some days he felt like he was holding up a version of himself that the world loved, while the private version struggled to breathe. He carried those battles privately, not out of secrecy, but because vulnerability was difficult for him. He had been raised with a strong sense of responsibility, shaped by a father who served as a U.S. Navy pilot and a household where emotions were often managed rather than expressed. But even the strongest are not immune to weariness, and Kevin quietly reached a point where he needed to learn how to sit with his own pain rather than outrun it. During those years, his family became the anchor he clung to. Fatherhood softened him in ways he never expected. The laughter of his children, the quiet moments at home, the effort to show up even when his heart felt heavy, these became lifelines. Yet balancing family with an intense career proved incredibly difficult. There were days he was pulled in two directions, wanting to be fully present at home yet needing to meet the demands of the industry that had shaped his life. He made mistakes, learned harsh lessons, and carried the guilt of moments missed. But through it all, he kept trying, learning slowly that presence mattered more than perfection. It was during this period that music began weaving itself more deeply into his life. What had once been a private passion became a vital form of therapy. Kevin Costner and Modern West formed in the early 2000s, giving him an outlet that felt authentically his, free from critics, free from Hollywood expectations, free from the constant comparisons. With the band, he found a different kind of storytelling, one that allowed emotion to move through him rather than remain trapped beneath layers of obligation. They recorded albums, toured across the United States and internationally, and built a devoted following that connected not just to his name but to the sincerity of the music. It became a safe space, a way to breathe again. Through music, travel, and the shared bond of performing with a close-knit group of musicians, Kevin began untangling years of emotional strain. He learned to give himself permission to slow down, to admit when he was tired, and to recognize the importance of vulnerability. Being open about his struggles allowed him to reconnect with the parts of himself he had long set aside. The man who had once carried everything alone began to understand that strength could also mean letting others in. As the years moved forward, he embraced a quieter self-awareness. He recognized the need to protect his peace, to prioritize the people he loved, and to create a life with more intention and less pressure. The challenges of the past did not disappear, but they shaped him into a man more grounded, more compassionate, and more attuned to the cost of the life he lived. He emerged with a deeper understanding of himself, a man who had walked through darkness and come out carrying a gentler truth. There comes a moment in every long life, especially a life lived under the illumination of fame, where the world expects a quiet fade into memory. But for him, that moment never arrived, not because he pushed against time, but because he kept discovering new ways to tell the truth. When he stepped into the unexpected chapter that began with Yellowstone in 2017, audiences did not simply see an actor returning to work. They saw a man whose history had softened into wisdom, whose craft had aged into something patient and steady, something that could only be earned through years of surviving both triumphs and the private storms no camera ever caught. Yellowstone was a turning point, not a revival, and not a reinvention. It was a continuation of a life devoted to authenticity. The role resonated because it matched the man, layered, weathered, shaped by responsibility, and refined by empathy. And while the Western landscape around him told its own sweeping story, his presence brought the emotional gravity that grounded the entire series. Viewers felt it, critics recognized it, and award circles followed, with nominations, including Emmy attention, that acknowledged not only the performance on the screen but the decades of workmanship behind it. He was no longer simply an actor of earlier eras. He was a living thread connecting generations of storytelling, showing that relevance is not a matter of age, but of depth, honesty, and the courage to keep creating. But the late career acclaim, as welcome as it was, never changed the quiet way he navigated the world. Humility had always been the guiding force beneath the fame. He had seen enough success to know it was never permanent, and enough heartbreak to understand the weight that comes with visibility. Even at the height of his resurgence, he chose stillness where others chose spectacle. He preferred listening over talking, observing over demanding, teaching instead of leading from above. And in these later years, mentorship became not an obligation, but a calling. Younger actors often found themselves drawn to him, not because he offered easy answers, but because he offered presence. He had mastered the art of meeting people where they were, handing down not rules but perspective. For him, mentorship meant conversation, respect, and a commitment to the craft that transcended ego. Those who worked alongside him spoke often of his openness, how he treated everyone with the same level of dignity, whether they were seasoned performers or newcomers navigating their first days on set. That quiet generosity became part of his legacy, as defining as the films, awards, or characters that shaped his career. And yet, beneath that calm exterior, there lived a deeper emotional truth, one that carried both triumph and heartbreak in equal measure. His journey was never one of unbroken victories. It was a life marked by profound artistic highs, unexpected setbacks, personal reinventions, and the constant work of rebuilding oneself from the inside. What made his later years so powerful was not the recognition, nor the late career spotlight, but the resilience he continued to show long after anyone expected him to keep fighting for a place in the industry. It was courage in its quietest form, persistence without complaint, dedication without applause, integrity without calculation. Today, when people speak of him, they speak not only of the classic roles or the modern success of Yellowstone, but of the man behind it all, a man who lived his artistry with sincerity, who protected his humanity even when fame threatened to rewrite it, and who carried empathy as if it were a responsibility. Awards honored his performances, but the world honored his character, and in the final measure that may stand as the greatest achievement of his long and extraordinary career. In the end, his story is not simply the story of an actor, a director, or a star who shaped decades of cinema. It is the story of a man who walked through the unpredictable terrain of fame and carried its weight with remarkable grace. Behind the iconic performances and the celebrated milestones was a human being who faced exhaustion, heartbreak, and private battles with a resilience that was never loud, but always steady. His triumphs were extraordinary, yet they lived side by side with moments of doubt, loss, and the quiet longing for balance. What makes his journey so deeply resonant is the way he held all of it together. His devotion to family, his commitment to craft, and the emotional honesty that guided every step. He spent a lifetime navigating the pressures that come with being endlessly watched, yet he never lost the dignity that defined him long before the world ever knew his name. And when viewers look back on his work, they are not only remembering the films, they are remembering the man who brought his full heart into every frame. His life reminds us that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it simply endures. For more emotional stories, check out this video.